Because remember, a 5 is compliance with legislation. So if you're a 0 or a 1, you could ask, are you really fit to be operating a business in terms of food safety?
Richard, so on your list of things you'd like to see improved in 2024, what's the top?
The top for me is a significant increase in the number of managers and supervisors that are trained in food safety. We do train a lot of food handlers in food safety, but quite often, for some reason, the majority of businesses don't seem to train the managers and the supervisors to anywhere near the level they should in food safety.
Yeah, something you're very passionate about, Richard, and makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you for sharing that insight. So important. Number 2, Richard?
I'd like to see the mandatory use of thermometers. So everybody uses thermometers for checking that food's been cooked and is stored at the correct temperature. So that's another one that's very important.
Absolutely. I hate it when people say well cooked, and you see that in some guidance as well. Cooked well, let the juices run clear. What you want to know is what the temperature is actually in the center of the piece of meat you're cooking, maybe.
Exactly.
What about number 3, Richard?
I'd like to see much more effective communication of problems, epidemiological problems, food poisoning incidents, and things like this. I don't think we see enough accurate and timely reports about root causes of food poisoning. When we get food poisoning outbreaks, let's get the information of what caused the problems back to the food industry, back to the enforcement officers, so they can both ensure they're aware of the current problems.
Well, that's a good one. So I certainly resonates with me about an evidence base, isn't it? Because we all make decisions based on evidence that comes from a source that you can trust. And as you say, how can we correct things? How can we stop things repeating unless we know what the root cause of the problem is? So that's a good one. One for me I might reflect on, Richard, is one that will resonate with you again. Is I've been fighting for 40 years for food licensing. I think food businesses should be licensed. We do see that around the world. It's an effective system of generating cash to support regulation. It's an effective system of making sure that a premises is up to the right standard before it's opened. And it's a great way of going back to premises as well, renewing that license so that you make sure that a regulator gets a view of what's happening. So your view on licensing, I know that it's one of your hot potatoes that you always talk about.
Fully agree with you. I'm a big fan of licensing, not only for the structure, but also making that staff and managers are trained before the business opens. And what about the food hygiene rating system? How would you like to see that improved, the system? There's a couple of things I can think, but I'm interested in your views on how we can improve that.
Well, for me, I think it's frustrating that still in England and Wales that you don't have to put the food rating score on the door. I think the score should be on the door so that the consumer can make an informed choice. It's a great system, but at the moment it's voluntary whether you put it onto so the public can make that decision in an intelligent way. I know in Scotland, for instance, if I've been to Scotland, everyone has that on their doors, especially the ones that have got low scores are the ones you want to look out for. And obviously in England, if you don't know what the score is, you have to make an assumption why they're not doing it. So that would be important for me. And also a bit controversially, and I know not everyone would agree with me, I think allergens are so important. And I think somehow the food hygiene rating system should have a mention of allergens so the enforcement officer specifically has to look at it. There's not many enforcement officers. They don't have much time. So they tend to do what you have to do rather than the nice to do. And hopefully when they look at management systems generally, they'll be looking at allergens as an example. But personally, I'd like to see it there in some way that will draw the enforcement officer's attention to it. And more importantly for the restaurant as well, if they can see it's a question being asked formally by an enforcement officer, I think that's a great idea. What would your build be?
I'd like to see something that's probably even more controversial. I think that any business that is scored either a 0 or 1 should be seriously considered for closure until they've brought the business up to standard. I don't think there's any reason to have a food business that is operating at those kind of scores. Because remember, a 5 is compliance with legislation. So if you're a 0 or a 1, you could ask, are you really fit to be operating a business in terms of food safety? So that was my controversial suggestion for next year.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But as you say, people assume that a 5 is like a 5-star hotel or a 5-star restaurant, like Michelin stars or along that lines. But 5-star, all it means is you're compliant. Nothing more or less than that. It doesn't mean you're super compliant or going over the top of legislation or best practice. It just means you're meeting what the law says you should. I might throw one in as well, Richard, about the lack of enforcement officers. I see Food Standards Scotland did a report only yesterday talking about their need for more officers, and I've heard it both in England and Wales and Northern Ireland. And it's great having this system, but if you haven't got the enforcement officers to back it up, I wonder, are the sites getting visited as regularly as one would hope? I know it's a risk-based approach, but I don't think you can fail to have an EHO going across a doorstep and making sure they're up to the right standard that the public expect, and giving people support as well in that environment. What's your thoughts as well, Richard, about the lack of EHOs that seem to be out there at the moment? A great shortage.
Yeah, it's very worrying. And one of the things that people might like to consider is environmental health officers. It's a 4-year qualification or a 3-year qualification, and they cover so much that is there a case which for getting suitably trained food safety officers that are just trained in food safety, because it takes 4 years to get an EHO in there, and we need them now. We need trained people to look at food safety. So should we be looking at enforcement officers or increasing enforcement officers that are food safety specialists?
Which is what is going on now in a lot of universities offering either apprenticeship or short courses. I see at Birmingham University, they have specific courses, relatively short, where you're not trained in the whole gamut of environmental health, but specifically you're trained in food safety legislation and enforcement. So maybe that's the way that will help as well. What one thing sure is that we need educated, competent people going across that threshold of restaurants, and anything we can do to support that process, I think, would be great. Well, thank you, Richard, for your views, and looking forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks then, Sterling. Bye.